"Shut up. Don't move." The voice was sharp, low, and commanding, utterly out of place in the backseat of a $1 million Rolls-Royce Ghost. Brenda Cole froze, her fingers tightening around her Hermes clutch. She had expected silence after the gala, but instead, he was there. A janitor, in her Rolls-Royce. Benjamin Harris in a faded uniform sat across from her like a shadow. His gaze was unflinching, his tone deadly calm. If you want to live past tonight, they're listening. Brenda's heart lurched. Listening? Who? Hadn't her driver noticed? Where was security? She opened her mouth to scream, but his hand shot up, silencing her. For a woman who commanded entire markets, for the first time in years, Brenda felt fear. City lights slashed across the windows as the car sped on. He leaned closer, his whisper cold. "They will take everything from you, Brenda, unless you listen, tonight." And then the impossible question pounded in her mind. Why would a man who scrubbed her floors risk everything to sit here and order her to be silent? If you want to know why a janitor would dare to command a billionaire inside her own luxury car, stay with this story. Because what Benjamin revealed that night would unravel layers of power, betrayal, and secrets buried for 15 years, secrets that could cost them both their lives. The chandelier glowed like liquid fire, scattering shards of gold across the marble floor of the Grand Orion Hotel. Cameras flashed, a storm of white light exploding around Brenda Cole as she stepped onto the red-carpeted entrance. Every lens wanted her. Every whisper followed her name. Brenda, the billionaire who had clawed her way from a Midwest upbringing to the very top of global finance. Tonight's gala was in her honor, a celebration of Cole Capital's expansion into yet another continent. Her gown shimmered, midnight blue silk flowing like water. Diamonds dripped from her neck, not just as jewelry but as declarations of victory. The press swarmed, voices overlapping. "Ms. Cole, over here." "Brenda, one look. Tell us, is it true you're about to acquire Lockhart Holdings?" She paused, tilted her head with the trained precision of a monarch, and let the cameras drink her in. To them, she was untouchable. And beside her, Evelyn Shaw. Tall, poised, perfectly tailored. Evelyn had been her right hand for over a decade, the gatekeeper who knew every number, every secret. While Brenda dazzled, Evelyn observed, her eyes sharp behind her champagne glass. She smiled when Brenda smiled, laughed half a second later, the perfect echo. But there was another figure, easy to miss in this glittering crowd, Sophia Moreno. Barely 24, fresh out of grad school, she trailed 2 steps behind with a tablet clutched to her chest. Her dress was professional but modest, her heels too stiff for the marble floor. To the guests, she was invisible, just another assistant ferrying schedules and reminders. Yet, every so often, her eyes flicked upward, watching Brenda with something between awe and unease. The gala pulsed with music and money. Politicians toasted her. CEOs begged for a word. Brenda thrived in it, her laughter carrying like silver bells, her confidence towering above the chandeliers themselves. To her, success was measured in applause, in the way the room tilted toward her presence. But in her orbit, Evelyn's hand never left the wheel. She whispered reminders, nudged conversations, smoothed edges. If Brenda was the face, Evelyn was the architecture holding the empire upright. Sophia, meanwhile, absorbed it all. The arrogance, the alliances, the icy small talk. She scribbled notes, recorded whispers, her nerves trembling under the weight of a world she barely understood. She admired Brenda, but also feared her. This woman who moved people like chess pieces, who believed money was gravity itself. At midnight, the final toast rose. Brenda raised her glass high, eyes burning with triumph. "To power," she declared. The hall erupted in applause. She basked in it, unaware that tonight would carve cracks into everything she thought was unshakable. Because across the ballroom, unnoticed, a janitor in a faded uniform wheeled away a cart. Benjamin Harris had been there all along, cleaning up spilled champagne, ignored by those who believed themselves gods. But he saw. He always saw. And when the gala ended, when Brenda slipped into her Rolls-Royce Ghost, clutching her glittering prize of the night, she had no idea the man who scrubbed her floors was about to rewrite her world. The silence inside the car was razor-sharp, only the hum of the engine and the city breathing beyond the glass. Benjamin leaned back, his uniform creased, his expression carved in stone. Brenda stared at him, fury simmering beneath her fear. "You have 10 seconds, she hissed. "Explain yourself before I have you thrown into prison." He didn't flinch. "Evelyn and Victor are setting you up," he said evenly. Her laugh was sharp, echoing like glass breaking. "Victor Kane, the most loyal partner I've had in years? Evelyn, my Evelyn. Don't insult me." But Benjamin didn't retreat. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded contract, edges worn. He handed it across the seat. "Read." She snatched it, scanning with the practiced eye of someone who devoured mergers before breakfast. It looked familiar, too familiar. A deal she had signed last month, one she'd celebrated publicly. But as her eyes swept across the fine print, her breath caught. Figures didn't match. Clauses were missing. Buried in the lines was a shift of liability. Subtle. Lethal. "This is a forgery," she snapped, but her voice lacked certainty. Benjamin's eyes narrowed. "That is the original. The version you signed was altered afterward. They buried you in your own signature." The car swerved past neon-lit billboards. Brenda's pulse pounded. Impossible. Evelyn had drafted that contract. Evelyn had assured her. Evelyn. And then Benjamin placed a second object on the seat between them. A tiny black device, no bigger than a coin. Her throat tightened. "What is that?" "A listening bug. Found it under your desk. You've been monitored for months." The words struck harder than any weapon. She imagined boardroom whispers, private calls, all of it siphoned away. Her empire naked in enemy hands. Still, pride clung to her like armor. She forced a laugh. "You expect me to believe a janitor over my most trusted ally? This is madness." Benjamin leaned closer, his voice low. "You think I want to be here? You think I'd risk everything, again, just to scare you? No, Brenda, I've seen this before. 15 years ago I tried to warn another CEO. She didn't listen. She lost her company. She lost her life. Do you want to be next?" Her blood ran cold. For the first time in years, Brenda Cole, the woman who commanded boardrooms with an iron will, hesitated. Doubt slithered into her chest, coiling tight. She looked again at the contract, at the device, at the man who should have been beneath her notice but who now sat across from her with terrifying certainty. For the first time, Brenda Cole didn't know if her empire was as untouchable as she believed. She doubted. Just for a flicker, but it was enough. The city lights flickered across Brenda's face, drifted deeper into the night. Her pulse hammered in her ears, her mind clawing for a way to dismiss the janitor's warning. But then Benjamin's eyes locked on hers. Calm, unyielding, weighted with something older than tonight. "You want to know why I'm here?" he said quietly. "Then listen, because this isn't the first time." Brenda folded her arms defensive. "You think a sad story will change my mind?" Benjamin didn't flinch. His gaze drifted past the glass, as though seeing through time. 15 years ago I wasn't scrubbing floors. I was an analyst. Numbers, contracts, patterns. They were my world. And I saw something, just like I see it now. The car's hum became the backdrop for his words. There was a company, Ellison Dynamics, small but growing fast. The CEO, Thomas Ellison, was young, hungry. Reminded me of you tonight at the gala. He wanted to build something that lasted, but he trusted the wrong people. Benjamin's voice dropped lower, like gravel dragged across stone. I found discrepancies in a major deal, tiny shifts in numbers, hidden clauses that bled the company from the inside, money laundering disguised as investments. I knew it was deliberate. I knew it was a setup. So I went to him. I begged him to look closer. Brenda's eyes narrowed. And? He laughed, Benjamin said flatly. He thought I was paranoid. He thought loyalty was unshakable. Just like you think tonight. The memory darkened his face. His hands, calloused from years of labor, tightened into fists. They destroyed him, Brenda. Within months, Ellison Dynamics collapsed under the weight of bad investments. His board turned on him. Shareholders sued. He lost everything. And when the press swarmed his home, when creditors circled like vultures, he put a gun in his mouth. The words carved through the air. Brenda inhaled sharply, but he wasn't done. His wife left. His children. They still won't say his name. That was 15 years ago, and every day since I've carried the same question. Could I have done more? Could I have forced him to listen? The silence was suffocating. Benjamin leaned forward, his eyes burning now. So when I saw the same signs, the same patterns around you, I swore I wouldn't stay silent again, even if it cost me everything. Brenda's bravado faltered. She opened her mouth, closed it again. For years, she had measured worth in assets, in power. She had never once considered the weight of a man's failure carried across a lifetime. Her voice cracked despite herself. You expect me to believe this? This tragedy is why you're in my car? Why you'd risk prison just to hand me a file? Benjamin nodded once. Yes, because this isn't just business, Brenda. It's the same playbook. Evelyn and Victor aren't partners. They're predators, and you are their next feast. The images spun in Brenda's mind. Evelyn at her side, smiling with quiet precision. Victor shaking her hand too firmly, whispering promises of dominance. She wanted to reject it, but the contract still burned in her lap. The listening device still glared like an accusation, and Benjamin's words rang with the authority of a wound that had never healed. For the first time, she studied him, not as a janitor, but as a man forged in loss. His uniform was faded, his face lined, but there was steel beneath it all. This was not madness. This was memory. Why tell me now? She whispered. Benjamin's eyes softened. Because you remind me of him. The fire, the ambition, the arrogance. But you still have something he lost. You have time to listen. And I won't watch another life burn because I stayed quiet. The weight of it pressed against Brenda's chest. The gala applause still echoed in her ears, mocking. She had believed herself invincible. Yet here was proof that empires could crumble overnight and that ghosts walked beside the living. Outside, the car cut through the city like a phantom. Inside, Brenda Cole, the woman who ruled markets, sat silent, a sliver of fear and doubt piercing her armor. And Benjamin Harris, once a man of numbers, now a man of floors, carried the scars of another's ruin as both warning and weapon. 15 years ago, he failed to save a CEO. That death has haunted him. Tonight, Brenda was his chance at redemption, or his second failure. For the first time, Brenda didn't argue. She didn't scoff. She simply stared into the darkness ahead, wondering if the ghosts of his past were about to become her own. Brenda's knuckles whitened against her clutch as the weight of Benjamin's story settled over her. She had listened longer than she intended, and every instinct screamed to reclaim control. This was her car, her world, her rules. "Get out!" she snapped, her voice cold as steel. "Now, before I call security and have you buried in lawsuits." Benjamin didn't flinch. He simply met her glare with that same unyielding calm, the silence stretching until it became unbearable. "I should have walked away back then too," he murmured. His eyes softened for the first time. "But I couldn't, because she reminded me of you." Brenda froze. Her lips parted, but no sound emerged. She had expected arguments, threats, even pleas. Not this. "Who?" she whispered. Benjamin leaned back, shadowed by the passing lights. His wife, the one who tried to believe. She carried fire in her eyes, same as you tonight. Strong, proud, but already surrounded by wolves. She begged him to see the truth. He didn't, and when he pulled the trigger, it broke her. She never recovered. The memory shivered through his tone, too raw to be rehearsed. Brenda turned away, staring out the tinted glass. For the first time all night, she felt the sharp crack in her armor. He wasn't threatening her. He wasn't even asking for her trust. He was confessing a wound he couldn't close. "You remind me of her," he repeated quietly, "and I won't let history devour you too." The car slowed at an intersection, red light bleeding across the cabin. Brenda's hand hovered near the door handle. She could end this now. Step out, call security, erase the whole encounter as a moment of madness. Her driver glanced through the mirror, oblivious to the storm inside. But then, on the curb, another pair of eyes caught her own. Sophia. The young assistant stood in the drizzle, clutching her phone to her chest. She had been sent ahead to confirm tomorrow's schedule at headquarters, but clearly she hadn't left. Her gaze flicked from Brenda to Benjamin, uncertainty written across her face. Brenda's chest tightened. Sophia was green, earnest, fragile in a world that devoured weakness. The girl's anxious stare mirrored something Brenda hadn't seen in years. Concern, unpolished and real. For a flicker of a second, Brenda wondered what Sophia saw in return. Did she see a titan of industry, unshakable in her authority? Or did she see a woman cornered by Janitor's truth, unsure of which way to turn? The light turned green. The car rolled forward, Sophia's figure swallowed by the night. Brenda exhaled, low and shaky. She turned back to Benjamin. "You've said enough," she murmured. Benjamin's jaw tensed as though bracing for the order to leave. But then Brenda's hand fell from the door handle. She didn't push the panic button tucked into the armrest. She didn't call for her driver. "Fine," she said. Her tone was clipped, but the edge of command had dulled. "You have 5 more minutes. Convince me this isn't just another ghost story." Benjamin inclined his head, not triumphant, not smug, simply resolute. The car pressed on through the wet streets, carrying a billionaire and a janitor bound now by something more than circumstance, a fragile thread of possibility. Brenda shifted in her seat, posture rigid. She hated the taste of hesitation, yet she couldn't shake his words, couldn't erase the tremor in his voice when he spoke of the woman who never recovered. And when she closed her eyes for half a breath, it wasn't balance sheets or gala applause that filled her vision. It was Sophia's worried face at the curb, a reminder that her choices carried weight beyond herself. Brenda Cole, who had built an empire on certainty, was suddenly walking into shadow. And for the first time in years, she chose not to turn away. The hum of the engine filled the silence between them. Brenda sat rigid, her fingers tracing the stitching of her leather seat. She had given him 5 minutes. 5 minutes to prove he wasn't just another delusional conspiracy peddler. If Benjamin failed, she would end this charade. "You claim Evelyn is moving against me," Brenda said finally, her voice clipped. "Anyone can say that, but let's see if you actually know something worth my time." Benjamin nodded once, as if he'd expected the test. Brenda leaned forward, eyes sharp. 2 months ago, I signed a joint venture agreement with Rivas International. Evelyn drafted the paperwork. There was a detail only 2 people knew, me and the CEO across the table. What was it? The car jolted over a pothole, but Benjamin didn't blink. "You negotiated a hidden equity clause," he said evenly. "Rivas thought they were getting 30%. In reality, through a deferred shell, you secured 45. Only their CEO, and you knew. Evelyn wasn't supposed to see the writer unless she planted the revisions herself." Brenda's breath caught in her throat. She had buried that clause so deep, most of her legal team didn't even know. For a janitor to name it without hesitation, impossible, unless he had truly once been inside her world. How? She began, but he cut her off. Because she leaked it, Benjamin said. Victor's firm already has the documentation. They'll accuse you of fraud. It won't matter that you only did what they all do. By the time the headlines scream your name, your empire will be ash. That's their play. Brenda's pulse hammered. She masked it with a cool smile. Convenient story. But you could have guessed. You could be bluffing. Then ask me something only you would know. His calm unnerved her. She sifted through her mind, through years of ruthless deals and private battles. Finally, she settled on a memory so obscure, it felt almost absurd. 3 years ago, Shanghai, she said slowly. A closed door. Meeting. Only myself, the CFO, and one translator were present. What was said in that room? Benjamin's gaze turned inward, as if replaying footage only he could see. Then he spoke, his words low but precise. The translator misrendered a single phrase. He said short-term debt relief. What the CFO actually promised was long-term asset concessions. You caught it instantly. You corrected him, in Mandarin. Everyone froze. Brenda's nails dug into her palm. That slip had been buried, never documented, never spoken of again. She had corrected the translator to protect her leverage. If word had leaked then, the deal would have imploded. "Who are you?" she whispered. Benjamin's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. Someone who sat on the other side of those tables. Someone who watched men like Victor bleed companies dry. I walked away when I refused to sign a lie. 15 years later, I scrub your marble floors. But I never forgot what I learned in those rooms. The car's interior seemed to shrink around her. For years, Brenda Cole had lived by one creed. Power was control, and control meant knowledge others didn't possess. Now, a man she'd dismissed as invisible was peeling back her secrets with surgical precision. The city blurred outside, neon streaking through rain-streaked glass. "You think you've proven something," she said, forcing a scoff. "But let me remind you, I built an empire because I don't scare easily, and because I don't trust anyone." Benjamin leaned forward, his voice like gravel. "Then don't trust me. Trust the truth you already know. Evelyn is not your ally. She's building a noose and you've already put your head in it." The words slammed into her, undeniable. Her stomach twisted with the recognition she refused to voice. Evelyn had been too close, too perfect, too indispensable, and Brenda, blinded by loyalty, had never questioned it. She looked away, biting back the flicker of fear. For the first time that night, the balance of power in her car shifted. Not entirely, but enough to rattle her. Outside, the city roared indifferent. Inside, Brenda Cole, billionaire, queen of the market, felt the unfamiliar chill of being outplayed. And Benjamin Harris, janitor in a faded uniform, sat across from her like a man who had just forced open the first crack in her fortress. The penthouse suite was dim, curtains drawn against the city skyline. Evelyn Shaw poured 2 glasses of wine, her movements precise, economical. Across from her, Victor Lang leaned back on the leather sofa, his bulk filling the space, a predator at rest. "It's ready," Evelyn said, sliding a slim folder across the glass table. "By the end of the quarter, Brenda will be finished." Victor flipped the folder open. Contracts, doctored spreadsheets, emails stripped of context but sharpened into weapons. His smile was slow, brutal. "Beautiful. You always did have a gift for burying. Knives where they'll cut deepest." Evelyn's lips curved, but her eyes were cold. "She gave me everything. Access, authority, blind trust. All I had to do was watch, wait, and collect the threads. Now the noose is tight." Victor took a sip of wine, savoring it like blood. "And the board. They'll fold?" "They won't have a choice," Evelyn replied. "Once these documents leak, the shareholders will demand a purge. Fraud, misconduct, misappropriation. The headlines will write themselves. Brenda will be forced to step down. you'll step in." Victor chuckled, low and dark. "And you?" "I'll be exactly where I've always been," she said, her tone like ice. "At the side of power. Only this time, it won't be hers." For a moment, silence stretched, filled only by the ticking of a designer clock on the wall. Then Victor leaned forward, his expression hardening. "What about the girl?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "Sophia?" "She's been asking questions, fetching files she shouldn't. You let her linger too close." His voice was sharp, edged with warning. Evelyn set her glass down, eyes narrowing. "She's green, naive, harmless." Victor's gaze cut through her words. "No one is harmless when they hold a thread that could unravel the weave. If she stumbles onto more than she should—" He mimed a snapping gesture with his thick fingers. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. "I'll handle it." Victor's grin widened, cruel. "See that you do. Because once this is in motion, nothing, no girl, no board member, no headline, can be allowed to ruin it." Evelyn gathered the folder back, slipping it into her briefcase. The polished snap of the lock echoed like a gavel. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we begin the end game." Victor stood, towering over her, his presence a storm contained in flesh. "Brenda Cole has ruled long enough. By the time she realizes the ground is gone beneath her, she'll already be falling." Evelyn met his gaze, unflinching. "And when she hits the ground, no one will catch her." They shared a look, an unspoken pact of ambition and betrayal. Two predators circling the same prize, bound by greed, sharpened by resentment. Outside, the city glittered, oblivious. Deals were being struck in skyscrapers, fortunes rising and collapsing in the span of a heartbeat. But here, in this quiet penthouse, a different kind of currency traded hands, loyalty measured in deception, partnership sealed in bloodless cruelty. Neither Evelyn nor Victor knew that far across town, in the backseat of a speeding car, a janitor in a faded uniform was already unraveling the threads they had woven. The clock ticked on. The trap was set. The morning after the gala, the office tower gleamed like a monument to power. Polished marble floors, glass walls, and the steady hum of an empire in motion. Brenda Cole swept through the lobby with her usual confidence, but her eyes flicked to Sophia Chen, the young assistant trailing at her side. "Sophia," Brenda said sharply, pausing at the elevator, "I need you to run a task, quietly." The girl straightened, clutching her tablet like a shield. "Of course, Ms. Cole." Brenda's gaze was steely. "Pull the internal logs from Evelyn's last 30 meetings. Cross-check the timestamps with board records. Don't ask questions. Don't mention this to anyone." Sophia nodded, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her nerves. "Yes, ma'am." The elevator doors closed, leaving her alone with the order heavy in her chest. It was the first time Brenda had trusted her with something outside scheduling and coffee runs. She didn't know why, but she felt the weight of it, like being handed a live wire. Hours later, while Evelyn held court in a glass-walled conference room, Sophia sat tucked away in an unused workstation. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, accessing logs, cross-referencing schedules, pulling strings of data no one expected her to touch. At first, it was mundane. Calendar invites, meeting notes, lists of attendees. Evelyn's record was meticulous, nothing out of place. But then, buried deeper, Sophia found something strange. Entries with timestamps that didn't match the official minutes. Meetings that lasted longer than recorded. Notes marked confidential, with attachments missing. Her heart quickened. She dug further, copying files into a hidden folder. And then she saw it. An email chain, flagged as deleted but still lodged in the server's shadows. Evelyn to Victor. Subject line: Phase 2. Sophia opened it. The words chilled her. Brenda will fold faster than projected. Victor, your pressure on the suppliers is already shifting the balance. By quarter's end, she'll have no ground left. Secure the contracts, and I'll deliver the board." Sophia covered her mouth, afraid the sound of her own breathing would give her away in the silent room. The casual tone of betrayal, typed in perfect corporate phrasing, was worse than a scream. Her eyes scanned to the attachment. A contract draft. When she compared it against the version logged in official records, the differences were subtle but devastating. Altered terms, shifted clauses, amounts misreported. It painted Brenda as negligent, complicit even. Her hands shook as she saved both files, her thumb hovering over the trackpad. She hesitated. If she was caught, she wouldn't just lose her job. She might disappear, the way stories sometimes hinted but never proved. A noise behind her made her jump. She snapped the laptop closed. Just a coworker passing, oblivious. Sophia forced a smile, waited for him to vanish, then reopened the screen. She whispered to herself, steadying her pulse. "Come on, Sophia, just finish." She transferred the documents to an encrypted drive she barely knew how to use, the kind of tool she'd installed for her own privacy but never imagined employing against the people she worked for. Every keystroke felt like stepping into a minefield. Then the system flashed. Unauthorized access alert. Her blood turned cold. She yanked the cable free, praying she hadn't tripped something irreversible. On the other side of the glass wall, Evelyn's laughter drifted from the conference room, smooth and unbothered. Did she already know? Sophia packed up fast, sliding the drive into her pocket. She glanced once more at Evelyn through the glass. The woman's expression was serene, hands folded as she charmed a table of executives. It was the face of control, of absolute certainty that no one beneath her noticed the cracks. Sophia swallowed hard. She knew too much now. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. By evening, when Brenda called her into the office, Sophia's hands were clammy. She placed the drive on the desk without a word. Brenda raised a brow. "What is this?" "Proof," Sophia whispered. "Evelyn's hiding things, and Victor's involved." Brenda leaned back, studying her with a mix of suspicion and intrigue. She hadn't expected the timid assistant to deliver more than timetables and coffee orders, but as she opened the files, the truth unfolded in black and white. Sophia stood frozen, her heart in her throat. She wasn't just an observer anymore, she was inside the storm. And somewhere deep down, she realized, they would come for her. The city streets were slick with rain when Brenda stepped out of her car that evening. Benjamin's instructions still rang in her mind, terse and cryptic. "There's a man you need to meet. Marcus, he'll tell you why I'm here." She had nearly dismissed it. Yet here she was, standing outside a modest diner far from the glittering towers of her world. The neon sign buzzed faintly, throwing fractured light across the sidewalk. For a woman used to boardrooms and gala halls, the place felt foreign, almost dangerous. Inside, Detective Marcus sat in a corner booth, a steaming cup of coffee before him. He was broad-shouldered, his hair graying at the temples, his face weathered by years of seeing things people preferred to ignore. When Brenda approached, his eyes lifted, sharp and assessing. "Ms. Cole," he said, motioning for her to sit. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Brenda slid into the booth, her guard firmly in place. "Benjamin sent me. I don't even know why I'm here. He's a janitor. Why should I listen to him?" Marcus gave a short, humorless laugh. "That's the thing about Benjamin. People always see the uniform, never the man. I did once. Nearly cost me everything." Brenda leaned back, arms crossed. "Enlighten me." Marcus stirred his coffee, gaze steady. 15 years ago, Benjamin worked in finance. Sharp mind, sharper instincts. He spotted something no one else wanted to see. Dirty money funneling through a company that looked untouchable. He warned them. He begged them. No one listened. Brenda frowned. "And?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "And a young CEO. The kind who believed too much in the system, ignored him. The man lost everything. Weeks later, he put a bullet in his own head, left behind a wife and a son who never understood why. The weight of his words pressed the air flat between them. Brenda's breath caught. "You're telling me this janitor predicted it?" "I'm telling you," Marcus said slowly. "Benjamin was right, dead right, and everyone who dismissed him. Good people, powerful people, paid in blood and ruin." Brenda shook her head, but her certainty wavered. "So what? Now he's decided to haunt my life, burst into my car like some ghost from a failed crusade?" Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice. "He's not haunting you. He's saving you from making the same mistake. Evelyn and Victor aren't just ambitious, they're predators. Benjamin's seen their kind before, and if he says they're coming for you, they are." The name Evelyn triggered something in Brenda, an image of her polished smile, the flawless way she handled investors, the trust Brenda had given her without hesitation. Doubt clawed at the edges of her composure. She forced her voice steady. "Do you trust him? Would you bet your life on him?" Marcus didn't blink. "I already did. Once. He pulled me out of a fire no one else saw coming. Cost him his career, but it saved mine. That's why I'm still here, wearing this badge. That's why I'm telling you. Listen to him." For the first time, Brenda couldn't summon a rebuttal. She stared at the rain streaking the diner's window, her reflection fractured in the glass. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why does he care?" Marcus studied her carefully. "Maybe you remind him of the one he couldn't save. Or maybe he just knows what it's like to be underestimated, dismissed, written off. Either way, if Benjamin Harris has risked crawling out of the shadows to warn you, don't waste it." The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of dishes and the low murmur of other patrons. Brenda's world of certainty, spreadsheets, numbers, control, felt suddenly fragile. Marcus slid a card across the table. His name, badge number, and a single handwritten note. Trust him. Brenda picked it up, her hand unsteady. Outside, the rain had eased to a drizzle. She stepped into the damp night, her driver waiting at the curb. For once, she didn't immediately climb into the car. Instead, she stood still, Marcus's words replaying in her head. Benjamin was right. No one listened. And they died. The city lights flickered in the puddles at her feet, distorted, unstable. For the first time, Brenda Cole, the woman who believed she controlled everything, wondered if she was already standing on a trap door. The underground parking lot was almost empty, its silence broken only by the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Sophia clutched her tote bag close, the weight of the flash drive inside, heavier than gold. She had done exactly what Brenda asked, combed through Evelyn's private meeting logs, uncovered a string of suspicious files and copied them quietly. But she knew enough to understand this was no harmless errand. Her sneakers scuffed softly against the concrete. She glanced over her shoulder for the third time. Empty. She tried to calm her breathing. Just get to the car. Hand it over to Brenda. Then it's out of your hands. From the shadows, two figures detached themselves. One tall, built like stone, the other wiry, eyes glinting under the dim light. "Evening, sweetheart," the taller one said, stepping into her path. His voice carried no warmth. Sophia froze. I think you're mistaken." "Not mistaken," he cut her off, his hand shooting out to grip her arm. "You've been somewhere you shouldn't." Her tote bag slipped from her shoulder as she twisted, trying to pull free. Panic flooded her chest. She tried to scream, but a gloved hand clamped over her mouth, muffling the sound into a whimper. Above them, a camera blinked red. Sophia's eyes darted toward it, desperate for salvation. But the wiry man shook his head with a cruel grin. "Disabled. We planned ahead." The tall one yanked her toward the far corner of the lot where a black van waited, its engine already rumbling low. Sophia thrashed wildly, her muffled cries echoing against the concrete walls. Her bag burst open, papers scattering, photocopies of Evelyn's meetings, emails she had flagged. fragments of truth that now lay exposed on the cold floor. The wiry man stooped, scooping up the evidence with brisk efficiency. "Got it," he muttered. "Boss will be pleased." Tears streaked Sophia's cheeks as she fought against their grip. She wasn't a fighter. She was barely more than a girl thrown into a war she didn't understand. But somewhere inside, she knew this wasn't just about her anymore. She had seen too much. As they dragged her closer to the van, the taller man leaned down, his breath hot against her ear. "You should have kept your nose out of it. Now you'll learn what happens to little spies." Her scream was strangled against his palm. The van's door slid open with a metallic groan. Darkness yawned inside. From the upper deck of the lot, Evelyn watched with folded arms. Her heels clicked softly as she stepped into the dim light. Every trace of charm was gone from her face. She looked down at Sophia with cold detachment. "I warned Brenda once," Evelyn said, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Stay loyal. Stay blind. But no, she sent you, and now you've confirmed everything I needed to know." Sophia shook her head violently, eyes wide, pleading. "Take her," Evelyn ordered. "Victor will decide how useful she is, or how disposable." The men shoved Sophia into the van. The door slammed shut, sealing her cries inside. The engine growled louder, wheels screeching against the slick pavement as the vehicle vanished into the night. Evelyn bent down, picking up one last sheet of paper Sophia had dropped, a meeting agenda with Brenda's initials scribbled in the margins. Evelyn's lip curled into a smile. "So, it's true," she whispered to herself. Benjamin's poisoned her mind. Straightening, she dialed a number on her phone. When Victor answered, her tone was icy. "We have a problem. The girl saw everything. But don't worry. By the time Brenda realizes she's missing, it'll be too late." On the other end, Victor's laughter rumbled like thunder. "Good. Let her watch everything she built collapse, and then we'll decide what to do with her precious assistant." The call ended. Evelyn slipped the incriminating paper into her coat pocket and walked away, heels echoing in perfect rhythm. Far across the lot, a cleaning cart rattled. An old man pushed it slowly, deliberately, his cap pulled low. He had seen enough. Benjamin's eyes followed the van's taillights until they disappeared into the darkness. His jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the handle of his mop. He knew what Evelyn and Victor had just done, and he knew what it meant. Sophia was no longer just a pawn. She was a witness, and in their world, witnesses rarely survived. Benjamin exhaled, heavy with the weight of memory. Another young life hanging by a thread, just like before. He couldn't let history repeat itself. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed on, indifferent. But Benjamin's resolve hardened in the silence. If Brenda had hesitated before, she wouldn't anymore, because now the game wasn't about contracts or meetings. It was about blood. Brenda's office was a fortress of glass and steel, perched high above the city skyline. Normally, she found comfort in the panoramic view, New York reduced to tiny sparks of light beneath her. But tonight, the city felt hostile, like every shadow concealed Evelyn's eyes. Her hand trembled as she scrawled her signature across a draft contract. It was a document of surrender, signing away her majority shares in exchange for one thing: Sophia's safe return. Her fountain pen pressed hard, nearly tearing the page. Benjamin stood silently near the window, arms crossed, watching her. His face was unreadable, but his silence pressed heavier than any words. "You don't understand," Brenda snapped, her voice brittle. "They'll kill her. She's a child, and she trusted me. If signing this stops it, then what does it matter? It's just money, just power. I can rebuild." Benjamin finally turned, his gaze sharp. "Number. It's not just money. It's not just power. If you give in now, you'll lose more than your company. You'll lose yourself." The words cut through her like glass. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "Easy for you to say." You have nothing to lose." Benjamin stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. "I had everything once. A career, respect, a family. And I watched it all vanish because men like Victor silenced me, because I refused to bend." His jaw tightened. "I know exactly what's at stake." Brenda's chest rose and fell, the contract trembling in her hands. For the first time in years, she looked small, not the untouchable billionaire, but a woman cornered. "You think I'm selfish," she whispered. "Maybe I am. But I can't have her blood on my conscience." Benjamin reached out, not to grab the contract, but to steady her wrist. His touch was surprisingly gentle. "Her blood is already on their hands. Signing this doesn't save her. It only tells them their methods work. And once they know you'll fold, they'll never stop. They'll gut your empire and leave her in the ground anyway." The words landed like a blow. Brenda blinked, tears welling at the corners of her eyes, quickly masked by anger. "You don't know that." His stare was unflinching. "I do. I've seen it before." Silence stretched. The city lights flickered across the glass walls, shadows stretching long. Brenda's hand hovered over the page, pen trembling. For years she had lived by one rule: control or be controlled. Evelyn had been her right hand, Victor her trusted ally. Now both were poised to devour her. And here, in her darkest hour, the only person telling her not to surrender was the janitor she had once dismissed as invisible. Her laugh broke, ragged. "This is madness. Listening to you, trusting you, it's madness." Benjamin's reply was steady. "Madness is doing what they expect. Madness is feeding the wolves and praying they'll spare you. Do you want to be remembered as the woman who built an empire, or the woman who signed it away to save her pride?" Brenda lowered the pen. Her fingers released it slowly, the weight of the choice pulling her shoulders down. For the first time, she didn't have an immediate answer. The mask of arrogance slipped, revealing fear, guilt, and something deeper: doubt. She sank into her chair, burying her face in her hands. "God help me," she murmured. Benjamin didn't move. He let the silence settle, his presence steady, grounding her. When she finally raised her head, her eyes were different. The steel was still there but softened, tempered by something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: humility. "You really believe I can fight them?" she said quietly. "I don't just believe," he answered. "I know, but only if you stop running, only if you trust me." The irony wasn't lost on her. A woman who trusted no one now being asked to trust the one man she had overlooked for years. She studied him in the dim light, his faded uniform, his lined face, his calm conviction. Not a janitor. Not anymore. Finally, she exhaled, her voice steady. "All right, no deal, no signature. If they want war, they'll get one." Benjamin allowed the faintest nod. No smile, no celebration, just acknowledgement. The true battle was only beginning. Outside, thunder rolled across the city as if marking the shift. Inside, Brenda Cole, once untouchable, then broken, took her first step toward believing in someone other than herself. The warehouse loomed on the edge of the city, an abandoned skeleton of rusted beams and shattered windows. Rain slicked the cracked pavement outside, the sound echoing like distant drums of war. Brenda stepped inside hesitantly, her heels clicking against the cold concrete floor. She had expected darkness, emptiness, but instead she found Benjamin. He was already there, stripped of his janitor's jacket, his faded shirt clinging to a frame leaner and stronger than she imagined. A steel pipe lay in his hands, and with one sharp movement, he swung it against a stack of rotting crates. Wood exploded in splinters. Brenda flinched. "This is what you do at night?" Her tone was half incredulous, half mocking, though her eyes betrayed unease. Benjamin didn't answer immediately. He lifted the pipe again, his stance precise, controlled. Every swing was efficient, brutal. The pipe whistled through the air and crashed against another crate, reducing it to fragments. He moved like a man who had rehearsed this ritual for years. "I spent 15 years cleaning floors," he finally said, his breath steady. "But I never stopped preparing. Every night, every weekend, waiting for the day when truth would need more than words." Brenda tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in her throat. This was no janitor idly venting his frustrations. This was training, discipline forged from pain and exile. Benjamin tossed the pipe aside and turned toward her. His eyes, cold in the flickering light, seemed to look through her. "You think power is in contracts, in signatures. Victor knows power is in fear, in force. You have to face that." "I'm not built for this," Brenda retorted. "I fight in boardrooms, not in shadows with fists and pipes." "Then learn." He moved closer, grabbed her wrist, and in one swift movement twisted it behind her back. Brenda gasped, her body stumbling forward against his chest. His grip was firm, but not cruel. "See," he said, "1 second of hesitation and they own you." Anger flared in her eyes. "Let go." He released her instantly, stepping back. "That anger, use it, but channel it. Otherwise it eats you alive." She rubbed her wrist, glaring. Yet beneath the anger, there was something else. A dawning realization. The man she once dismissed as invisible, weak, replaceable. He was something entirely different. Benjamin picked up 2 wooden sticks from the ground and tossed one to her. "Swing," she scoffed. "This is absurd." "Swing." His voice was iron. Reluctantly, Brenda raised the stick. Her first strike was clumsy, barely grazing the stack of crates. Benjamin shook his head. "Again." She tried again, harder. The wood cracked against the surface, but not enough to break it. Sweat prickled her forehead. "Again." He didn't relent. Blow after blow she struck, her frustration boiling over into force. By the 5th strike, the crate splintered. She dropped the stick, panting, her hair sticking to her face. Benjamin only nodded once. "Better." Brenda stared at the wreckage, chest heaving. A strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration coursed through her veins. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't in years. Raw, unfiltered strength that came not from money, nor influence, but from within her own hands. She looked at him. Truly looked at him. The years of silence, of invisibility, had carved a man of iron beneath the humble uniform. His every movement carried weight, purpose, and discipline born of scars she could not yet see. "You're not who I thought you were," she admitted softly. Benjamin's face remained impassive, though his eyes flickered with something deeper. "None of us are." For a moment, the warehouse fell silent except for the rain drumming on the roof. Brenda felt the shift inside her, something fragile breaking, something stronger rising in its place. The respect she had never given him, not once in 15 years, began to take root. Her voice, quiet but resolute, cut through the air. "Teach me." Benjamin regarded her with a long, unreadable look. Then, without a word, he handed her the stick again. This time she gripped it firmly. The night pressed heavy against the crumbling factory on the outskirts of the city. A single, flickering bulb above the rusted door sputtered like a dying heartbeat. Inside, shadows stretched long across damp concrete walls. Somewhere in that maze of metal and silence, Sophia was locked away, her fate sealed by Evelyn and Victor's order. Benjamin moved like a phantom. Dressed in black, he slid past the broken gate, his footsteps muffled against the rain-soaked ground. The janitor uniform was gone. In its place was a man forged for this exact moment. Every muscle was taut, every sense sharpened. A guard smoked near the entrance, his eyes half closed. Benjamin crept behind him, seized his collar, and in one swift motion snapped him into unconsciousness. The body slumped quietly to the floor. No hesitation, no wasted movement. He pressed forward. Inside, the warehouse pulsed with menace. Old machinery loomed like rusted skeletons, gears frozen in time. The stench of oil and mold clung to the air. Somewhere deeper, Sophia whimpered. Soft, terrified, muffled. Benjamin followed the sound. A second guard appeared, swinging a flashlight beam across the corridor. The light caught Benjamin's shoulder. In that instant, the guard reached for his weapon, but Benjamin lunged first. The fight was brutal, silent. A fist to the throat, a knee to the ribs, the weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. The guard crumpled. He pushed deeper, through corridors lit only by blinking bulbs. The building seemed alive, groaning under the weight of secrets. Every corner could be an ambush. His breath remained steady, his eyes unflinching. He had lived 15 years for this. Then, he found her. Sophia sat bound to a chair in a narrow room, her wrists raw from rope. Her face lit with shock when the door creaked open. For a heartbeat, she feared Victor's men. Then she saw Benjamin. Relief broke through her tears. "Don't move," he whispered, cutting through her bonds. But the moment was shattered. Heavy boots thundered from the hall. 2 more guards burst inside, weapons drawn. Benjamin shoved Sophia down behind the chair just as the first guard swung a baton. He caught the blow on his forearm, twisted, and drove his elbow into the man's jaw. The second lunged forward, knife flashing. Benjamin ducked, seized his wrist, and slammed him hard into the wall. The knife skittered away. The fight spilled into chaos. Grunts, fists, metal clanging. Benjamin moved like a storm contained in human form. Every strike precise, merciless. He crushed one guard against the wall, the impact rattling the steel beams. The other staggered forward again, blood seeping from his lip. Benjamin's knee rose, brutal, final. Silence fell. Sophia trembled, clutching the broken ropes. "How did you—" "No time," he cut in, grabbing her arm and pulling her to her feet. "Move." They slipped into the corridor, but alarms began to wail. Shrill, piercing. The whole warehouse stirred awake. Red lights pulsed, painting the hallways in blood-colored flashes. More men rushed in, shouting. Benjamin shoved Sophia ahead, blocking blows, disarming attackers with feral precision. A pipe came crashing toward his skull. He ducked, spun, and slammed the attacker into a railing. Another lunged with chains. Benjamin ripped them free and swung them across his face. Every second stretched into eternity. Sophia stumbled, gasping, but he never let go of her wrist. He dragged her through the storm, absorbing pain, giving it back tenfold. Blood slicked his knuckles, sweat dripping down his temple. At last, they reached the back exit. Rain hammered the steel door. Benjamin shoved it open, and the night roared in. He pulled Sophia into the storm, both of them drenched instantly. And waiting in the shadows of the lot, Brenda. She had come, against every warning, against every instinct. Her rolls had pulled up quietly, hidden beneath the trees. Now she stood in the rain, her silk dress clinging to her skin, watching with eyes wide as Benjamin burst out of the inferno with Sophia alive at his side. In that instant, something inside Brenda broke and reformed. The man she had once dismissed as invisible had walked through hell, faced fear with his bare hands, and brought back what mattered most. No contract, no boardroom, no fortune had ever shown her this kind of power. Their eyes met through the rain. Brenda's lips parted, trembling not with fear but with awe. Her faith, once brittle, hardened into something unshakable. Benjamin said nothing. He didn't need to, because in that storm, in that moment, she finally believed. The rain had barely dried when the boardroom lights blazed to life. The table was long, sleek, polished to a mirror shine, but tonight it felt more like a battlefield than a chamber of strategy. Executives murmured in low tones, eyes darting to one another with nervous anticipation. At the head sat Evelyn, immaculate as ever, her lips curled into a measured smile. Beside her stood Victor, hands folded, the faint scar on his jawline catching the light like a warning. Brenda walked in late. The room hushed instantly. She moved with steady poise, heels clicking against the marble floor, her hair slicked back after the storm. Every camera in the room turned, every eye narrowed. Some expected defeat in her stride, but her chin was lifted, her gaze sharper than steel. Evelyn's voice sliced through the silence. "You're late, Brenda. Not that it matters. The board has already reviewed the evidence. Your time is over." Brenda placed her clutch on the table with deliberate grace. "Evidence," she echoed. Her tone was cool, laced with disdain. "You mean the forged documents you slipped into circulation, or the phantom meetings you logged behind my back?" Murmurs rippled through the executives. Evelyn didn't flinch. "Accusations are not proof. What we have," she gestured toward the screen at the end of the room, "is a pattern of negligence, poor judgment, and outright incompetence, enough to strip you of control." The screen flickered to life, spreadsheets and doctored reports filling the air with damning statistics. Brenda's eyes didn't waver. She let Evelyn finish her grand display, let Victor smirk as though victory was already his. And then Brenda stood. She didn't raise her voice, but the weight of her words slammed down like thunder. "You call this proof? Then let's put it to the test." At her signal, the door opened. Marcus stepped inside, his badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Sophia followed, pale but resolute, clutching a thick folder of files. And behind them, moving with the quiet gravity of a storm contained, came Benjamin. Gasps broke across the table. Evelyn's smile faltered. Victor shifted, his jaw tightening. Marcus spoke first. "I've been watching this case for months. I can confirm certain contracts were manipulated by insiders, and not by Brenda Cole." He laid down photographs, forensic reports, signatures compared under magnification. The weight of law crashed into the room. Evelyn tried to recover. "Fabrications, easily planted." Sophia's voice, usually timid, cut through like a blade. "Not planted. I saw the original logs. I copied the emails myself before you deleted them." Her hands trembled, but her words held steady. She laid out the recovered files across the table. "Your fingerprints are on every change, Evelyn. Every one." The room went still. Executives leaned closer, scanning the damning pages. Brenda took a step forward, her eyes locked on Evelyn. "You built your empire on manipulation. You thought I was too arrogant to notice. Maybe I was, but not anymore. You wanted my downfall? You'll watch me rise instead." Victor slammed a fist against the table, his voice booming. "This is a setup. You think we'll let some janitor and a frightened girl dictate corporate power?" The word janitor hung in the air like poison. But Benjamin didn't flinch. He stepped into the light, calm, unyielding. "You underestimate the people you step on, and that's why you lose. Every empire that ignores the truth eventually crumbles. Tonight is the beginning of yours." The board members whispered frantically, some shifting uncomfortably under Victor's glare. The balance was shifting, minute by minute. Evelyn tried once more, her tone silken, desperate. "Brenda, think carefully. Do you really want to expose all this? It will drag your company's name through the mud. Investors will flee. Competitors will feast. The only way forward is with me." Brenda leaned across the table, her voice ice. "The only way forward is without you." The tension snapped like a whip. Evelyn's mask cracked, rage flashing behind her polished exterior. For the first time, she was the one cornered, her power bleeding into the floor. Benjamin's gaze met Brenda's, and in that silent exchange she felt the full measure of her transformation. No longer the untouchable billionaire who dismissed those beneath her. Now, she was the woman who had listened, who had fought, who had chosen to stand. She turned to the board. "You've seen the evidence. You've heard the truth. If you value this company, If you value integrity, then you know what must be done. One by one, hands lifted. Hesitant at first, then decisive. The tide turned swiftly, like a storm breaking. The majority sided with Brenda. Evelyn's face drained of color. Victor swore under his breath, his fists clenched but powerless. Brenda exhaled, steady, victorious. The power that Evelyn had clawed and schemed for slipped away in a single vote. Silence lingered, thick and heavy, until Brenda spoke again, this time not to the board, but to Evelyn herself. You thought control was everything, but true power isn't built on fear. It's built on trust, and tonight, you lost both. Evelyn stood frozen, her empire collapsing around her. Victor's glare promised violence, but Marcus's presence kept him chained to his seat. The boardroom had witnessed something none of them would forget. Not just the survival of a CEO, but the rise of a woman remade, and the janitor who refused to let the truth be buried. The boardroom was still vibrating from the vote when Brenda gave a subtle nod to Sophia. The young assistant, pale but determined, stepped forward with a small flash drive clenched tightly in her fist. Her voice wavered at first, then steadied. There's something you all need to hear. She plugged the drive into the projector. The screen flickered, then the room filled with a familiar voice. Evelyn's, sharp and cold. Once she signs the transfer, we'll bleed her dry. The shareholders will never know until it's too late. A pause, then Victor's gravelly tone followed. And if she resists? Then, Evelyn said, her voice dripping with venom, we remove her. Permanently. Gasps rippled through the boardroom. Several executives leaned back in their chairs as if scorched. The recording continued, damning in its clarity. They heard Evelyn plotting every step of the coup, rigged contracts, falsified meetings, threats hidden in polished smiles, and Victor's low growl punctuating it all with the promise of violence. When the audio ended, silence fell heavy as stone. Evelyn's mask cracked at last. She rose abruptly, her composure shattered. This is illegal. That file could be doctored, spliced. Sophia cut her off, her small voice steady but lethal. It isn't doctored. I pulled it from the security archives, time-stamped, authenticated. You forgot the cameras in the East Wing, Evelyn. They heard every word. The weight of truth pressed down, undeniable. Brenda didn't speak. She didn't need to. The board was already murmuring, recoiling from the woman they had once admired. Victor surged to his feet, fury boiling in his eyes. "Shut that thing off!" he bellowed, but Marcus was already there. The detective produced a set of handcuffs, his tone calm, implacable. "Victor Hale, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and attempted extortion." Victor snarled, lunging forward, but Benjamin intercepted him, one hand gripping his shoulder like iron. The janitor's strength, once invisible, once dismissed, held the larger man in place as Marcus locked the cuffs. The sound of metal snapping shut echoed like a verdict. Evelyn staggered, reaching for words, but nothing came. Her empire, built on manipulation and silence, had just collapsed in front of everyone. Her allies turned their faces away, unwilling to be tainted by her downfall. "You can't do this," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. Her hands trembled, clutching at the edge of the table as if it might anchor her. "This company was mine. I built it." Brenda finally spoke, her tone quiet but sharper than a blade. "You didn't build it, Evelyn. You poisoned it, and now you'll answer for it." The board erupted into hushed voices, some with disbelief, others with relief. For years, Evelyn had ruled with an iron fist cloaked in charm. Now, stripped of her facade, she looked small, almost pitiful. Security entered, summoned by Marcus's signal. They escorted Victor out first, his curses echoing down the hall until the doors slammed. Evelyn followed, her eyes still darting wildly for some lifeline, but none came. She was alone, her downfall complete. The executives turned back to Brenda. Some looked ashamed for ever doubting her. Others looked at her with newfound respect. She met their gazes without flinching, though deep inside, her chest rose and fell with the weight of everything she had almost lost. Sophia closed her laptop, her hands shaking. Benjamin placed a steady hand on her shoulder, grounding her. She had risked everything to expose the truth, and now, for the first time, her courage was undeniable to all. Brenda walked to the head of the table, the seat Evelyn had tried to steal, and rested her hand on the chair. For years, she had ruled through power, through fear of weakness. But now, standing in the ashes of betrayal, she understood that real authority came from trust. "This company will not be defined by lies," she declared. "Not anymore." The board members nodded, some even applauding softly, cautiously, as if afraid to break the spell of the moment. The storm had broken. The truth had won. Yet as Brenda looked at Benjamin, she knew the fight had not been hers alone. Without him, she would have signed away her soul. Without Sophia, the proof would have vanished into shadows. Without Marcus, justice would never have stepped into the light. The janitor, the assistant, the detective, 3 people who were never meant to stand in a room of power, had become the pillars that saved it. Evelyn and Victor were gone, but the memory of their voices lingered, a warning carved into the walls of the boardroom. Brenda would never forget it. Neither would anyone else. And for Benjamin, watching Evelyn's empire collapse, there was no triumph in his eyes, only quiet resolve. He had seen this story play out before, 15 years ago, when no one listened. This time, they had. The boardroom, once a place of manipulation and control, had become the stage where truth was laid bare. The reveal had ended the old order. What came next would test them all. The boardroom emptied slowly. Voices hushed, footsteps scattered like fragments of a storm that had finally passed. Papers lay strewn across the polished table, contracts and agendas forgotten. The seats once filled with men and women calculating their profit margins were now vacant, their silence heavier than any shouting match. Brenda remained standing, her hand gripping the back of the chair she had reclaimed. For years, she had believed her empire was untouchable, fortified by wealth, power, and her own unyielding will. Tonight, she saw it differently. The empire had crumbled in seconds, not from outside competitors, but from within. Her world, polished to perfection, had been held together by threads she hadn't even noticed fraying. Her breath came uneven, each inhale sharper than the last. For the first time in decades, Brenda Cole felt the tremor of fragility in the very foundation she had built. The illusion of control was gone. She looked around the room, at the walls of glass reflecting her image back at her. The reflection seemed older, thinner, almost human. "I see again." Sophia stood nearby, small in stature but transformed in presence. Gone was the timid assistant who once kept her head down in corners. Her eyes, though still wide with the residue of fear, carried something new: clarity, determination. She had walked into the fire and returned, and now she carried its scars not as weakness but as proof she had survived. Their gazes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Brenda read the question in the young woman's expression. Was it worth it? She didn't have an answer. Instead, she reached out, resting a hand on Sophia's shoulder. The gesture was awkward, foreign to a woman who rarely touched anyone. But Sophia didn't flinch. "Thank you," Brenda whispered, the words escaping before pride could trap them. Sophia's lips curved into a faint smile, quiet, grateful, yet resolute. She knew this was only the beginning. Trust once broken could never be fully restored, but it could be rebuilt, brick by brick, truth by truth. Across the room, Marcus was still finishing paperwork with the security team. His steady presence had brought order to chaos, yet even he glanced toward Benjamin, as though acknowledging the silent architect behind tonight's victory. Benjamin. He stood by the door, the janitor's uniform still creased from years of unseen labor, but now it looked like armor. His face carried no triumph, no gloating satisfaction. He had seen too much to mistake this moment for glory. Justice was never clean. It was always messy, always soaked in the weight of what had almost been lost. He met Brenda's eyes briefly. She opened her mouth, perhaps to offer gratitude, perhaps to ask him to stay. But he gave the smallest shake of his head. He wasn't built for applause, for boardrooms, or for the spotlight. He was built for shadows, where vigilance thrived and truth survived in silence. Without ceremony, he turned, pushing the door open. The hallway swallowed him whole, his footsteps fading like the last notes of a song no one wanted to end. Brenda watched him go, her throat tightening. She realized then that for all her billions, all her power, she had never encountered a man more untouchable than the one who mopped her floors. Sophia stepped closer, her voice soft. "Will he come back?" Brenda's answer was slow, almost reverent. "Number men like him don't come back. They move on, and the rest of us, we live with what they've left us." The young assistant nodded, absorbing the weight of those words. She wasn't naive anymore. She understood now that power was fragile, trust was priceless, and sometimes the world's quietest man carried its loudest truths. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent life. Cars streaming, neon flashing, strangers laughing on sidewalks. To them, nothing had changed, but inside, for Brenda, Sophia, and everyone who had witnessed the downfall, nothing would ever be the same. The empire still stood, but stripped bare. The woman who once ruled it felt, at last, the full fragility of the world she had carved. And somewhere in the night, Benjamin Harris walked alone, carrying his ghosts, his silence, and the knowledge that, for once, someone had listened. The skyscraper stood tall against the city's skyline, its glass walls gleaming as though nothing had happened. But inside, the atmosphere carried the residue of storm, quiet, fragile, uncertain. The headlines would call it a scandal, a corporate coup, a boardroom war. For Brenda, it was something else entirely. It was a reckoning. She found him in the most ordinary of places, the lower hall, marble floors shining under artificial light, the scent of disinfectant sharp in the air. Benjamin was there, as though nothing had shifted, his body bent slightly over the mop handle, his hands steady. For a moment, she stood frozen, a billionaire watching a janitor polish the world she almost lost. Her heels clicked against the floor as she approached. The sound broke his rhythm. He lifted his head, eyes calm, unstartled, as if he had expected her. "Why?" Her voice carried none of the authority she once wielded so naturally. It was stripped bare, raw, unguarded. "Why do all this? Why risk your life, your peace, for me?" Benjamin leaned on the handle, straightening his back. His expression was quiet, unreadable, but there was no bitterness. "I didn't do it for you," he said softly. "I did it because I couldn't watch it happen again. 15 years ago, I stayed silent. A man lost everything because no one listened. I swore I wouldn't let history repeat itself." She swallowed, her throat dry. "So, what do you want, Benjamin? Money? A position? A seat at the table?" The question hung between them, absurd in its simplicity. But she had to ask because her world had been built on transactions. Everything had a price. He shook his head slowly. "I don't want your table. I just want to work in peace." The words struck harder than any demand could have. Brenda blinked, stunned. For years, people clawed for proximity to her power, begged for favors, schemed for recognition. Yet here was a man who had saved her life, her company, and perhaps her soul. And he asked for nothing but silence, space, dignity. She opened her mouth to insist, to press, to offer him what she thought he deserved. But the look in his eyes silenced her. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper, an unshakable conviction that dignity required no reward. Benjamin dipped the mop into the bucket, wrung it with a practiced twist, and pressed it back against the floor. His movements were methodical, deliberate. To him, this wasn't humiliation. It was restoration. It was order. Brenda watched, her chest tight. The man's back was bent, his uniform faded, but he radiated something she had rarely seen in her world of power brokers and billionaires: quiet pride. Not the pride of status, but of endurance, of surviving, of refusing to let the world dictate his worth. The silence stretched, heavy yet strangely comforting. She thought of Evelyn, of Victor, of the boardroom filled with lies and betrayal, and then she thought of Benjamin, alone, steadfast, carrying ghosts no one else wanted to acknowledge. Her lips trembled, but she managed to whisper, "Thank you." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The faint echo of the mop gliding over marble spoke louder than words. The camera of memory pulled back, showing him as he was. A solitary figure framed against endless hallways, pushing a cart no one else noticed. His shadow stretched across the polished floor, ordinary yet monumental. And then a voice. Low, reflective, carried not by lips but by the heart of the story itself. In a world obsessed with power and titles, the true measure of a man is not in the chair he commands, nor the wealth in his account. It lies in the dignity that cannot be bought, and the courage that cannot be silenced. The words lingered as the scene shifted. Brenda walked away, her heels echoing softer now, not in dominance but in humility. Sophia stood at the far end of the hall, eyes following Benjamin with something close to reverence. She, too, understood now. Heroes didn't always wear suits or badges. Sometimes they wore faded uniforms and carried buckets, and still they held up the weight of truth. Benjamin finished the last stroke, parked the mop, and pushed the cart forward. His footsteps resounded in the quiet corridor. Each step was steady, measured, and eternal. They didn't just fade, they echoed, reverberating long after his figure blurred into shadow. The story could have ended there, but it didn't. It continued, not in spectacle, but in silence. Brenda rebuilt her company with caution now, her arrogance tempered by humility. Sophia grew into her role with strength, no longer afraid to speak, no longer content to remain invisible. And Marcus filed his reports, knowing the truth had, for once, reached daylight. But Benjamin remained what he had always been: the janitor, the man in the background, the one people ignored until their world cracked. Then he disappeared again, folding back into the rhythm of obscurity, carrying his mop like a soldier carries his rifle. Ready, always watching, but never asking to be seen. The final shot framed him not as a savior, but as himself. A man walking alone, his cart rattling softly, his shadow long and proud. The voice returned, gentle, almost a whisper now. "Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Share with us in the comments. We read every one with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to join a community that still believes in kindness, in healing, in second chances. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Wherever you are, carry this story with you. Remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story." The frame faded to black, but the sound remained, the steady, echoing footsteps of a janitor who asked for nothing and gave everything.